So the sermon this morning is a little bit different. I've invited some other people along to join in having a conversation. And if you've been watching our sermons the last couple of weeks, you know that we've been in a series on the metaphors for the church in the Bible, from the New Testament, from the Old Testament. So each week we've taken a different metaphor and thought about how that tells us what the church looks like, how that picture applies to who we are and who God is calling us to be. And I had initially planned on, I actually had another four metaphors, which you guys don't know yet. I haven't told you that, but I had an additional four metaphors, but it kind of felt to me like the series was maybe dragging on a little bit. And initially when we started the series, it felt like an appropriate time to think about what does the church look like in a time that we can't actually be at the building. But it feels like maybe it's time to pivot a little bit and also think about what do our personal lives look like too in the midst of this. So I decided this week to do a wrap up, which is what we all are doing here together, wrapping up the series and kind of reflecting on what are the things we've learned, what metaphors stood out to us maybe. I did hit the mute button on the phone, but it apparently wanted to ring anyways. So I thought it might be interesting to hear how you guys are processing it and what your thoughts have been. And then it's also a little bit of a test, which you guys don't know this either, but it's a little bit of a test for an upcoming series because the next series that we're going to do is on stages of grief. So thinking about any time that we lose something, whether it's a person or a job or normalcy, whether that's through sickness or whatever, anytime that we lose something, it's normal to kind of go through these stages of grief. And starting in June, we're going to start a series on the stages of grief and thinking about how that applies to things that maybe we feel like we've lost in this time, which many of you said it doesn't feel like you've maybe lost too much. But so anyways, that's the next series, which will be interesting to see how it goes. But I'm thinking about doing these WebEx calls for that series as well and inviting people on to kind of share their stories and so that everybody doesn't have to stare at my face every Sunday and can see some other faces too, other familiar faces. So that's some of the idea here. But I thought it might be interesting, rather than jumping right into that, for us to start at the beginning here of just kind of hearing what we haven't seen each other for 2.5 months. And everybody that is watching this now, when they're watching it, they're not watching it while we're talking, but haven't seen you for 2.5 months. So maybe for you guys to share kind of what have your worship practices looked like right now? How have you been using the worship resources? And it's totally fine. I imagine that a lot of people are using it in similar ways, and there also are people are using it in different ways. So don't feel ashamed if you're like, I haven't been doing it at 10:15 like I'm supposed to be, or I've just been listening to the sermons and I haven't actually used the packet, and this is why. So I feel free to share, and it's really okay because there's probably somebody else listening who has experienced it the same way as you have. But anyways, so that was kind of the first thing to start off with, just what has that looked like for you guys during this time?
I have to say it's been kind of nice to have the Sunday mornings be a little bit more relaxed. You know, we're not in a big rush to get the kids to Sunday school on time, and so we kind of start Sunday mornings kind of slow, just kind of wake up slowly, get some breakfast, have some reading time, some quiet time, whatever. Then generally we'll come downstairs and we will hook up to our big TV here, and we'll sing along with the music. We'll watch Tammy's call to worship. It's been good. We've been having our kids read the prayers and read the scriptures, so kind of getting them used to reading out loud to a group of people. Then after that part's done, we'll go upstairs, either try to print out the activities for the kids or just have them bring paper or clay or something, and they'll play around the kitchen table quietly while we listen to the sermon. And then afternoons, quiet. Amy sometimes goes to work depending on what day it is and what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of brought out Sunday being a good day of rest for us. It's been enjoyable, at least that part. I mean, I'm missing being with people. I'm missing playing guitar, but it's still been good. We've still enjoyed it, I think.
Have you pulled your guitar out at all and played along with any of the songs?
I haven't. I hope I can remember to play again. It's sitting over here in the corner. I think I've been tempted a couple times. Like, oh, this one has chords. I could play along with that one.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed actually being able to listen to the sermons. During church, I was usually trying to keep Abby quiet and not yell or be in the nursery. So I'm definitely not listening at 10:15. I'm waiting till nap time, but it's been nice to actually be able to focus on what's going on and listen. Um, in terms of other worship practices, I found, I really miss the singing at church, as like Seth said, the music. Um, I do not really play an instrument. So my, musical worship time has been more on my drive to work, listening to different praise music or singing whatever random hymns pop into my head, and just trying to use that as a way to like focus my day and get prepared for work. So that's been a major like worship practice that I've been trying to do at this time just to really help with anxiety and focus on, preparing for the day at work. And then usually after Abby goes to bed at night, I've also been trying to be more intentional about Bible reading and things like that. So I've been doing the Bible recap that a lot of people are doing. I'm not in the group because I started late, but that's been a really great experience as well at this time. Just I think one of the really cool things that I've seen so far is it shows you how Jesus shows up at different parts in the Bible where, before you might just think of seeing Jesus in the Gospels, but, he's there in Exodus and Genesis and all throughout the Bible. So that's been like a cool learning experience doing that Bible recap. Um, but those have kind of been my main worship practices right now.
You still joined the group. I'm so far behind that we'll probably equal now.
I don't think I'd be in the same page as the discussion right now, but.
How about for you, Verne? And actually, I didn't say, I should have maybe introduced who all was on the call. Verne just says call-in user number 2. So the call-in user is Verne Geissinger.
We've been using the resource and listening to the music. I'd say the thing we miss the most is the worship music that we generally participate in at church. And so that's one missing link. And but listening to the sermon or the sermon that you have, we usually listen to that. And we're listening at the 10:15 time, and go through the whole worship service. And I'd say what's different for us is that sometimes, Pastor Nathan, we listen to Deep Run East before we listen to you because they come on at 9 o'clock.
You can double dip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, well, someday we listen to like 3 sermons because we can listen to our kids' church from Indiana. But yeah, so that is quite different in that you can be at home and listen to different pastors that you appreciate their input. And the thing I find is I don't know how much you listen or read Max Lucado's books. But are
you still there? Are you still there, Verne? We might have lost him.
Am I back with you?
Yep, there you go. You're back. We were at, you said you don't know how much we read Max Lucado's books, and then you cut out.
Yeah, well, Max Lucado's on Facebook, I believe, every day, and trying to direct people's thoughts to his one character that he's really talking about is Joseph, and how Joseph prepared for the famine that came, and he compares this partly to that, in that we should we'll weather the storm and come out on the other side. And so I appreciate, what he has to say on that point.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think for us it's kind of similar to having kids at home. I think it definitely makes there's some similar experiences then. So the flexibility has been actually kind of nice. Being able to like pause church when Winslow needs to go down for a nap or needs to be nursed, and then we can rejoin all together and kind of pick up where we left off. So that's been actually kind of a nice experience. It's kind of a little odd sitting and watching myself preach. But I have actually watched all but one of the sermons. The one I ended up babysitting because the kids really needed they were being too interruptive. But other than that, I've actually watched all of them. So that's been an interesting experience, actually being able to like sit through a sermon, which I don't normally get to do. So yeah. And it sounds like too, some of you have mentioned other things you've been doing too beyond that. It's been interesting to me to see like how many resources there are. And that's been nice for me too as a pastor. I don't always get to get as much input from others too, but on Facebook, like there's videos out there. And so being able to actually have some other pastors giving input for me spiritually has been nice and even a little bit different. Obviously, many have sermons online I could go listen to other times, but it just feels like there's more access right now. So
yeah, I feel like there's more like intentionality because you're not going to church on Sunday, so you have to take more responsibility to actually do it yourself and look for spiritual ways to grow at this time. So I think that's been a good thing, is just learning to be more intentional and more motivated maybe to do some of those spiritual practices.
did you have something you were going to say, Seth? I kind of cut you off, but maybe
I was going to say something that I was getting pretty good at the mute button, because you kind of play roulette when you click a YouTube video if a ad's going to show up first. So I figured out how to turn off the autoplay really quick once I video ended. And what's the comedian guy, the Christian comedian? My kids have been loving him a lot, so he would tend to start auto playing after we finished the song, and maybe he's a good comedian, maybe not appropriate for what we were doing at the time. But
you get a little comedy video in the middle of church.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Kids loved it, but yeah.
Yeah, I go through and click all the links and like open them in their own tab before church so that I can like make sure we're past all the ads. And then when we sit down, we can just click through the videos. So that's how we've been doing it.
Good idea. Okay. Good idea.
So yeah, the sermon series has been, I already said, but it's been 8 weeks on different metaphors for the church. And like I said, there were more. And actually, there's even more than the 12. That was already me selecting certain ones. So is there anything in particular that stands out to you from the sermon series? Anything that was interesting that you kind of sticks with you? Or yeah, what do you remember or what stood out?
So thinking of the church as a family is probably one that stood out most to me. As I'm sitting down here in our basement with my family, and I'm imagining everybody else in similar positions across Pennsylvania here, even across the U.S., just sitting at home together, singing off key like us, just joining together. And I think, okay, well, this is probably how the early church used to do that. I mean, they met in each other's homes, and they were a family. And I think of our time in Alaska, a lot of people, the church was their family, because real family was other side of the country. And we had a lot of military folks come up there, and their families were lower 48 and same for us. So the church became our family. So just hearing that and listening to that part just kind of was giving me some good memories of just church being our family in times.
Yeah, one of the things I remember from that sermon is when you were saying, what if we really treated the church like a family, like when we had people from church over, if we didn't pick up our house. And then I was thinking, well, does Nathan want me to wear my pajamas tonight for this meeting? Because I'm FaceTiming with my family, that's what I'm gonna do. So I think maybe we're treating the church like extended family, so not quite as comfortable, but yeah, that's definitely one I can relate to as well. I was also relating a lot to the church as a body, working in healthcare. I think about the body all day. And I work with patients who have kidney disease. So one thing I hear a lot, when I tell them the reason you don't feel good is because your kidneys did this, or the reason your hemoglobin's low is because your kidneys aren't working. And they tell me, well, I didn't know my kidneys did all that. And I think that's kind of the same with the church is you don't notice when part of the body is important until it's not there. Like I might not notice or think about who changes the light bulbs in the sanctuary, but if that's not done, I'll definitely notice. So I can really see that metaphor, the parts of the body that you don't think about, but then when they don't work, you really notice it. And that's, I feel like, how it is in the church as well.
Well, yeah, part of it is fellowship. The meaning of fellowship, and then the fellowship that we're missing with one another right now. Yeah, we don't go to people's houses as much as we used to, but the whole fellowship thing of seeing one another, seeing you face to face, or seeing anyone face to face is quite different. When, like, talking on the phone, yeah, I can talk to Bill Rosenberg on the phone, but that's still not the same as seeing the person face to face.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's probably something that a lot of people are experiencing right now and feeling in a time when we can't see a lot of people face to face. Is there a particular sermon that has stood out to you in thinking about, or metaphor in thinking about that fellowship aspect of what it means to be the church?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of probably the correct one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, Vanessa, you were talking about the church being the body and thinking about, the parts of the body maybe that we can't see, like the kidneys, and we don't even think about what they do.
They're important.
Yep. And so, and just that connection between the parts and how each part functioning impacts everything else. And when one part of the body is unhealthy, that other parts of the body become unhealthy. And then also, I think something that was interesting to me that I didn't even necessarily anticipate before the series, but kind of going through it, was realizing not just the connection of the church to itself, but how each of the metaphors really have this part then of how we relate to people outside of us too. So the body functioning actually for the world is what the body metaphor in Scripture is about our mission and what we do then. And salt obviously is one that is pretty clear on that. But even the temple, the idea of the church being for, bringing the message and being the place of forgiveness, of sacrifice. So yeah, I think that's something that I wasn't even anticipating, but I didn't mention this through the series at all. But those first two metaphors, body and salt, actually were the ones that stood out to our leadership team when we did this at our leadership retreat in the fall. We looked at all these metaphors at our leadership retreat. And those are the ones that stood out to our leadership team the most, of kind of what it means to be the church, being a body and being salt. And that tension between our connection with each other, but also our mission together, which is actually where our goal for the year of connecting for a purpose came from. Is connecting is the connection of a body, and then purpose being the mission of being salt. So you guys already kind of mentioned two metaphors, the salt and the family, that were ones that stood out. Are there any others that maybe stood out for you or were especially meaningful for any reason, or that you thought, maybe you hadn't thought about the church in that way before, or you felt like it really kind of captured the essence of what it means to be the church?
I was thinking a lot. Sorry, go ahead, Seth.
Mine will be short. I was thinking about the church as a fortress was a new one. I'd never really thought of it that way before, and I'm trying to relate to that to our time now. Like my house, we're having church at the house. a house is a fortress, maybe, I don't know. But thinking of the giant cathedrals and stuff that was built, and whether, yeah, it was just an interesting way to think about it. Never thought about it that before. Yeah, it was interesting. Go ahead,
Yeah, one
Vanessa.
thing that I was thinking about with the church as a fortress was, you had, I think, mentioned the idea of safety in a fortress. Um, and I think that one way you keep people safe in a fortress is by keeping other people out. So like, that's not what we want, right? So that was just something that I was thinking about when you were talking about the church as a fortress, was how do we make it a safe place without keeping people out?
Yeah.
And then another metaphor that I was relating to a lot was the church as a mother. When I think of mother, I have a great relationship with my mom. Hi, mom. And I, think about things like caring and loving and unconditional love, safety. I haven't seen my mom in 2.5 months either. She's been down with my sister in North Carolina. So just really feeling, missing the church, missing my mother, seeing that connection, and also just the role of how a mother church help you develop the same. Thinking about when you're younger, both your mother and the church as a young Christian, you think more about rules and like teaching right from wrong. When you have a young child, you keep them safe by teaching them you don't do something. You might not explain why because they don't understand it. And I feel like that's kind of the same for a new Christian. They might not get why they're not doing something, but they know that's the rules in the Bible. But then as you grow and develop more of a relationship, you understand why you're not doing something, or you understand the love that makes God or your mother tell you not to do something. So I thought that was an interesting metaphor as well, just how your relationship with the church can grow and develop like your relationship with your mother. And by the end, it's more of a mutual friendship relationship where you're, both giving and receiving advice and counsel.
Yeah, I actually had a professor in seminary that compared not just our individual relationship to the church or community of faith, but then also that community's relationship to God, to the kind of in the same way you just talked about, of looking in the Old Testament where the relationship with God was new and God was trying to kindle this relationship, and so it was more rule based. And then as the community of faith got to know God better, moving more towards that almost I don't know if mature relationship is the right term, but where you do understand why things are happening in certain ways. So yeah, that definitely is something that's interesting to think about, how our personal relationship with the church grows and matures, and our personal relationship with God, but also how the church or the community of faith from Israel all the way up to today has kind of matured. And I think that's something else that was interesting to me, finding out how many of these metaphors really were rooted in the Old Testament. And you had mentioned earlier, Vanessa, with the Bible reading plan, the Bible recap, of seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. But then also, I think what was maybe I'd never necessarily thought about before was also, I mean, it was a new way for me of thinking about it, is also seeing the Old Testament in the church, and
Right.
how some of these things, like the tree, is a continuation of what the people of God were meant to be in the Old Testament. And I found in the sermons, I don't know if anybody else would notice this or not, but I found myself even using the word church less and just talking about the community of faith, because like sometimes the metaphor, it's like, was it talking about the Old Testament people of faith or the New Testament people of faith? And seeing how sometimes the same metaphors are speaking about both groups of people. So, Vern, you hadn't mentioned any metaphors. Are there any of the metaphors that maybe stood out for you, or any metaphors you think of that were missing in the series? That are there any of these metaphors for the church? The ones in the series was body, salt, temple, tree, fortress, mother, family, and vine were all the ones in the series. But are there any metaphors for the church that are especially meaningful for you?
Well, you mentioned tree there, and I was just thinking about tree and how the tree connects in the Old Testament to the New Testament, and connects the old and the new. And I had to think about, I just got done planting some trees again, and watch these trees grow. But these trees, these trees have continual growth and get bigger all the time. And the tree, we talk about family trees and how we go back to, all the way back to Europe, or how you can trace it all the way back to Europe, and the tree keeps on growing, and that's where our faith tree, I'll call it, should keep on growing with God, and from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and the tree just keeps on getting larger and gathering us in and gathering more to the tree of life, is the way I'll put it. And the one about the vine, as I around the property, me and the vines usually are not getting along too well because they crawl at different places where I don't think they should. But I can see that the vine is necessary for the growth of the church.
Yeah, that's something else that's just interesting to think about too in a lot of these metaphors, is the connection not just to people that are living right now. Like, we oftentimes think about the church as people that we gather together with on a Sunday morning, but also recognizing the people who have gone before us, and that we wouldn't have faith if it weren't for those that have gone before us. So like you said, that picture of the church as the tree, but the branches being added on, not just like a family tree by birth, but as a faith tree by those people that have had influence in our lives and have brought us to know who Jesus is and to follow him. So how about, is there anything that it felt like as you've been listening to the sermons, but then also maybe reflecting back on all of them as a whole, even through this conversation, is there anything about the church that maybe you feel was missed? Obviously, when you're only looking at just the metaphors in the New Testament, there's a whole bunch of other content that we weren't necessarily looking at. So is there anything that you maybe thought, oh, well, this is important in the church, but maybe it wasn't talked about?
I think I was just surprised, not missed, like you missed it, but I was surprised that one of the sermons wasn't the church as the bride of Christ. Because I think if someone asked me what a metaphor was for the church, the first thing I would have said was, well, the church is the bride of Christ. So that was just interesting to me that wasn't something that was a sermon title. Although I guess, bride could be part of family and things like that, but.
That is one of the 4 that I ended up not getting to. I actually had Bride and City on a Hill are both ones that I mentioned in sermons were going to be coming up. And it just felt like this series had kind of run its course and it was time to change direction. I am thinking, now we'll see. Right now it's very difficult to plan for the future, but we might come back to those 4 metaphors. They all would connect with each other fairly well. We might come back to that when we're actually in person again. And touch on some of those. So I'll wait and see whether people are like, yes, I want to do these ones we missed, or whether people are like, yeah, that was enough. 8 was enough. But yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. Bride is one that was definitely missed.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can't really think of any that were missed, but I've enjoyed it so far. It's been interesting to follow up and kind of relearn some of them, and the new ones, like the Fortress. I never followed that one before, and yeah, can't think of anything off the top of my head that was missed really, but I'm curious. Do you really put salt in your coffee?
So
I was too far away. I couldn't see.
There was not actually any, well, other than the nasty coffee that's left in the bottom, but there was no liquid in there. There still is a little bit of salt in the cup. I don't know if you can see it or not. Now that I just poured it all over my keyboard. So yeah, no, it was total acting.
Okay.
I actually, if you go back and watch it, I tipped the mug, like this, so that it looked like I was pouring, but the salt never actually poured. So.
Okay. I did double take. I'm like, is that salt that he's put there?
That whole week after that, my kids would randomly just be like, "Stay salty, my friends." How about for you, Vern? Was
Yeah.
there anything that felt like it was missing?
No, I guess because I hadn't thought of all of them, but the one about the fortress is interesting. In when you see some of these things on travel shows on TV, on how the church in different countries is portrayed like a fortress, in that they had different areas for people to go to and to be considered safe from the outside world. And in here we do not treat the church that way, but it's a place for safety for those who are coming to church and for those who need help. And we try and provide that.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately recognizing that our safety and security comes in Christ, and I think that's something that for me I've kind of been reflecting on. It's actually why I chose the vine as the last one, because I felt like probably I had missed a little bit of keeping that personal aspect. Like a lot of them were very focused on the community and what it means for the church to be a community, but the church only exists if there's individuals in the community. And so recognizing our personal relationship with God in the midst of that. So that was something that I tried to kind of catch at the end here and make sure like, I feel like that's important, right? It kind of is like the basis of it all. And then the other thing I've just been reflecting on, which I did talk about a little bit in the sermon on the church as mother, but maybe didn't talk about enough, is recognizing that like each of these pictures is kind of like the ideal picture, but the reality is like there's no perfect church. And so maybe grace felt to me like it just was missing a little bit, like recognizing each of our personal need for grace, but then like also grace for the church, like recognizing that like churches aren't always healthy, and church isn't always a nice place to be. Like there are good seasons and bad seasons. And so that's something maybe I think I don't think I could have gone back and changed anything, because the like scripture is presenting kind of the ideal and what we're targeting in terms of what the church is, but maybe just that reminder for all of us that it's not always as clean as we want it to be, or as it will be in eternity when we actually are finally fully cleansed from our sin. So yeah, those were two things I've kind of been thinking about, and I think are maybe good reminders for all of us here at the end of the series.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that idea of the church not being the ideal situation, I was thinking today about it would have been interesting to have some non-Christian perspectives on what do you think is a metaphor for the church. And I feel like a lot of people may have said things like judge, like, looking through history. I feel like the church often seemed to be a judge of morality, and sometimes, doesn't always have the best history. So I think that is just an interesting thought. Like you said, it's not always the ideal picture that the Bible paints. And the fact that, different people's backgrounds and situations could impact how they view the church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Any other final thoughts or anything that I wasn't related to these questions maybe, but has kind of struck you as we've talked? All right. Well, we are actually like right on time or so. We went a little longer, but I think we started a little later than I'd planned. So we'll end up seeing how long it is. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's not too long of a sermon for everybody to watch. But thank you guys for your time. Thank you for taking time to think about this and share your thoughts and what's been going on in your lives recently. And I'm gonna hit the end record button, and then we can